So, Thomas, you've read Pride and Prejudice, right?
Well, yes, it's one of the most widely prescribed novels in the English language, so yes, I've read it.
All right. So, tell me, when would you say that there's a point at which Elizabeth falls in love with Darcy?
That's a good question. When she gets his letter explaining everything? Or how about the time she discovers that he's actually paid for Lydia to marry Wickham? Those are both quite romantic moments, don't you think?
Yeah.
Maybe it's where she realizes what a good person he is and how much he cares for her.
Sure, okay. Have you considered this moment?
Elizabeth, as they drove along, watched for the first appearance of Pemberley Woods with some perturbation. And when at length they turned in at the lodge, her spirits were in a high flutter. The park was very large and contained great variety of ground. They entered it in one of its lowest points and drove for some time through a beautiful wood stretching over a wide extent. Elizabeth's mind was too full for conversation, but she saw and admired every remarkable spot and point of view. They gradually ascended for half a mile, and then found themselves at the top of a considerable eminence, where the wood ceased, and the eye was instantly caught by Pemberley House, situated on the opposite side of a valley, into which the road with some abruptness wound. It was a large, handsome stone building, standing well on rising ground, and backed by a ridge of high woody hills. And in front, a stream of some natural importance was swelled into greater, but without any artificial appearance. Its banks were neither formal nor falsely adorned. Elizabeth was delighted. She had never seen a place for which nature had done more, or where natural beauty had been so little counteracted by an awkward taste. They were all of them warm in their admiration, and at that moment she felt that to be mistress of Pemberley might be something. They descended the hill, crossed the bridge, and drove to the door, and, while examining the nearer aspect of the house, all her apprehension of meeting its owner returned. She dreaded lest the chambermaid had been mistaken. On applying to see the place, they were admitted into the hall, and Elizabeth, as they waited for the housekeeper, had leisure to wonder at her being where she was. The housekeeper came, a respectable-looking elderly woman, much less fine and more civil than she had any notion of finding her. They followed her into the dining parlour. It was a large, well-proportioned room, handsomely fitted up. Elizabeth, after slightly surveying it, went to a window to enjoy its prospect. The hill, crowned with wood, which they had descended receiving increased abruptness from the distance, was a beautiful object. Every disposition of the ground was good, and she looked on the whole scene, the river, the trees scattered on its banks, and the winding of the valley, as far as she could trace it, with delight. As they passed into other rooms, these objects were taking different positions. But from every window there were beauties to be seen. The rooms were lofty and handsome, and their furniture suitable for the fortune of its proprietor. But Elizabeth saw, with admiration of his taste, that it was neither gaudy nor uselessly fine, with less of splendour and more real elegance than the furniture of Rosings. And of this place, thought she, I might have been mistress. With these rooms I might now have been familiarly acquainted. Instead of viewing them as a stranger, I might have rejoiced in them as my own, and welcomed to them as visitors my uncle and aunt. But no. Recollecting herself, that could never be. My uncle and aunt would have been lost to me. I should not have been allowed to invite them. This was a lucky recollection. It saved her from something very like regret.
And of all this, I could have been mistress. Of all this, the lands, the manor, the furniture, the art, and all of that, not mistress of Darcy, but of everything he possesses.
Okay, so she falls in love with his money.
I guess that's one way to look at it. But at another level, did you notice how the class position tells us so much about the character of the man? How he orders his lands, how much power he has, how he treats people lower than him on the social ladder, what his housekeeper thinks of him, and so on. Meanwhile, his 16-year-old sister seems more symbolic of the essence of aristocracy. She's beautiful and well-mannered and sings and dances and plays the piano all day long, and also needs to be protected from nouveau riche upstarts who have wealth but not worth.
This is all very unromantic. Are you saying that Elizabeth is not in love with him at all?
Well, class is not a very romantic thing, is it?
I guess not. And I've noticed that there's a whole interpretation of just the landscape as it's described in the book and how it represents the natural yet cultivated ideal of beauty that aristocrats patronized at the time. So even landscape architecture is a class-driven subject, although I'm not sure it's gendered.
It's funny you should say that, because it might be gendered. You know how the way that the landscape is supposed to be natural, but just artificially pushed into a little more significance? That's the way women's beauty was looked at too.
And as for love, let's just say that Elizabeth's appreciation of the character of Darcy is much enhanced when she realizes his place in the social order.
Yes.